Greetings, brothers and sisters. I have a little headache today. No reason to say anything about it. It's fine. It'll be gone by the time I read your comment. So there's no reason to. The only reason I'm saying is because I'm not going to make a video today like a normal video. I'm just going to do a little voiceover here, and then one on my the Gratefullness meditation channel. Hopefully today, short one. And other than that, I won't be doing much on the computer today, just a lingering headache from yesterday. Probably go away sometime this afternoon or whatever. I don't know. We'll see. But anyways, I did have some thoughts. I just read one comment in particular about Barbie's effect on one of my viewers, in terms of body image and things like this, right? What the controllers do well is know how to manipulate people's imaginations. And this is very prevalent even here in the truth community, even maybe more so here in the truth community. The controllers are good at using people's emotions and imaginations to motivate people and help to prop up this system because they don't have their own prana or creative energy, right? The problem is with the economic system and then with the illusion, the other aspects of the illusion, it doesn't stand up to reality. And so, in this system, there's no happily ever after. In this divine system of Earth, life on Earth, there's no happily ever after. That doesn't exist. There's no potential for ever after, like that's infinity, forever and ever, right? Forever, ever. There's no happily ever after. There's no, there's no fairy tale ending. There's no the good guy always wins. None of those things really exist. But they've created that illusion on a variety of fronts. And let's just start off with the Barbie stuff here. And so there is an illusion, especially, this is targeted at women, that if your appearance is, if you're beautiful or whatever it is, that you'll be happy and you'll have you'll be that princess in the Disney princesses and stuff to do with Barbie and all that stuff. All the these movies and things, we'll have that chance at that fairy tale and the happily ever after. If you're pretty enough, you can win the prince, and you'll have a privileged and happy and seamless existence. And we know that isn't true, right? Because we know that even the supermodels aren't supermodels. I mean, they deep down know that they don't really look like they're presented. Beauty is a fluctuating thing, right? Beauty is something that is not, you're not going to be this. It's just like playing sports. Like your best day playing basketball or football or golf or whatever it is, you can't replicate that every day. You can't be your absolute best consistently. I mean, this happens in life. You have good days and bad days, and your appearance is part of that, right? Everything's changing, everything's in flux. You're going to put on a little weight, you're going to get older, you're going to have some wrinkles, you're going to have whatever. And some days are going to be worse than others. Things are going to affect your skin, and they've manipulated that through makeup and plastic surgery and through Photoshop and all these ways of creating these, images, these photo brushed images. They started doing this with, models in Playboy and these other places where they were taking out blemishes and imperfections. And even these models themselves, they were, what they were looking at in magazines or on film or whatever it is, know that that's not how they actually look, right? So even they have even maybe more so self-esteem issues in terms of, chasing this perfection. The term narcissist comes from the narcissus flower or something like that, right? And, this idea that you are obsessed with your physical appearance makes you into a bad person. And people who think that they're beautiful or handsome and stare at themselves at the mirror, it makes you into a bad person because you start thinking of yourself as better just based in your physical appearance, and you don't create anything on the inside. And more your energy comes to creating an illusion on the outside. And so all of those people who are, obsessed with their physical appearance, whatever, that means, they're horrible people because they end up becoming jealous. Jealousy is something that goes along with that, right? Because, it's a competition. Envious and hatred, then they end up hating mirror, mirror on the wall, all these tales of, these things, the various witches and things like this. But it's the most, I guess sports is a little bit like this, but beauty even more so. it is the most of the, where you get exposed just based in your aging, right? As you get older, you can't, I mean, when the epitome of beauty is considered, what you look like in your, late teens and 20s and early 20s and things like this. And then it's just a slow, downhill progression where you're fighting the inevitable. And you can see it. Like you look out in the mirror every day, people look in the mirror and are obsessed with the mirror. Mirror, mirror on the wall, right? So this is, these types of people. And you're fighting a losing battle. And for these, like, actresses and models and people, I guess even in terms of men, people like Brad Pitt or George Clooney, all these people, they're trying to appeal to everybody. And that's the problem with fame and celebrity. They're not trying to win one person over, right? They're not trying to, have one person that sees them as beautiful. When you have one person, you only have one person that has to, see you as beautiful and love you and, whatever. And through, it eventually has to involve your insides more than your outsides, right? What you are like as an inside as a person. A good person on the inside can easily obtain security in their relationships. People want to be with you. If you're a good person on the inside, people want to be with you. If you're rich and powerful and famous, people want to be with you for superficial reasons, either as, lovers and partners and spouses, but even as friends and, associates or whatever, and they're there for whatever those reasons are, right? But if you're a good person on the inside and you're likable and you're good to other people and you treat other people in a positive way, you just have a natural, attractiveness to you. People want to be around that, obviously. It's the, obvious solution. Master Chargi, the third master of the Sage-Mark system, talked about how you had these like so-called beautiful women who were able to attract men all the time. Men were always, flocking to them and, surrounding them, but they couldn't hold on to their man, right? They'd have a series of relationships, bad marriages, failed marriages, whereas a, mediocre-looking woman who was beautiful on the inside was able to just pick whatever man that she thought was the best one, and she'd be able to keep him because she was just great, and the inside great person. And beauty itself is, and especially the way it's done now, is artificial. It's not something real. I mean, some, people are just born with like a natural sort of beauty or whatever it is, natural attractiveness to them physically. But, for everyone else, and even those people themselves, it becomes something that they're constantly working on in the, in a superficial outside way. And they're not developing as good people. In fact, it's the opposite. If you hear these, I mean, just look at the Kardashians and look at these, all these types of, these Instagram and YouTube, these makeup people, they always have drama. There was, I was looking at the YouTube trends. I used to look at that a lot more. I don't think I look at it. I don't remember the last time I looked at it, but I used to look at it a lot. I had a couple of consultations with YouTube people who work for YouTube. And when my channel was growing, they set up these consultations. And one of the suggestions to make videos, pop and things like this, was to do things that were trending on YouTube. And then I saw that was all contrived. And, certainly after the whole way that they turned on the truth community in YouTube, it, wasn't helpful. But there's a lot of drama. The popular channels on YouTube, there's a group of people who had lots of subscribers, and a lot of them knew each other and they were making videos together. A lot of them were part of the fashion industry. And all this drama played out in the trending YouTube videos. Like they had no problem with hate and drama and all these things when it came to something superficial like that. But YouTube, of course, has their issues with real truth, real things, things like that. But then you see it in all those like housewife shows and all that, reality TV, the Kardashian stuff, all that stuff. And, of course, with celebrities and their fake relationships and, all of that. And they're miserable people. I mean, they're all very miserable people. They're petty, they're weak, they're insecure, they're envious, and they're just desperately clinging on to this idea of fame. We see this with Madam Expiration Day. We saw it with Will Smith. I mean, they're just flagrant examples, but it's perpetrated all throughout Hollywood. Occasionally you see somebody who just walks away. They make some money, they have some fame, they realize it isn't great, and then they go channel that into some, whatever it is, some mundane, more normal type of job or whatever it might be. Then they get married and they, have a nice house somewhere. And they have all the, the advantages of what they were able to extract out of their Hollywood career or their, whatever it is, being a great athlete or even a politician or something, and just settle down, have a more normal life, realizing that that other life doesn't make you happy. It's a lie, right? The happily ever after, the pursuit of happiness that's in the Constitution isn't something that can exist on planet Earth. We know that. It doesn't exist. It's not a goal. There's no, the people who are the most spiritual, the people who are the most accomplished in the world of divinity, people who have connected to God on a deep level, always suffer more than the average person because they are, their suffering is their ability to withstand suffering and their internal connection to God and things like this. And they suffer the negativity of their followers. It's just always the case. I mean, Christians should see this more than everybody else. Now, Christianity, which has become such a materialistic, religion and culture. I mean, these cultures from Europe and America where hedonism and sensory pleasure and things have reached new heights in all the, ways that are materialistic system. But if you're a Christian, you should see more than ever than most people, because it's just right there in your face. Like most saints and most spiritual people suffer in silence. You don't have the kind of suffering that Jesus had with the crucifixion and all his followers turning on him and all these things. Most of them, 1/4 of his disciples and most of his other followers, and then crucifying him and humiliating him in public, and then all the disciples suffering these horrific deaths in the persecution of early Christianity and Christians. When they turned this on its head, saying, well, Jesus suffered for you, so you don't have to suffer. That was the deal that they gave people, which is a lie. You can't die for someone else's sins. That's just, it's an obvious lie. Like, I don't even have to explain it. Either you can either see it or you're in denial of that truth. You can't die for somebody else's sins. Why would that? Why would there even be a system like that, right? I mean, think about any other system. Let's say they said Jesus would go to jail for everyone else's crimes. Jesus would spend eternity in jail for everyone else's crimes, and everybody else would go free. So you could commit any crime you want as long as you did it in Jesus' name. And he would suffer jail time. There'd be one jail with one person, and Jesus would be in there for eternity, suffering everybody else's crimes. And you were able to do any crime you wanted. And all you had to say is, I'm doing it in Jesus' name, and then he would suffer the consequences. How would that be good? How would that be good for the people, the criminals? How would that be good for people and humanity and the culture? It'd be bad, because it's not a good system. The fact that there are consequences for your actions is what makes this a good system, a divine system. Consequences that you suffer for your own actions makes it, fair and equitable, and it makes you, eventually have to change. But think about if the opposite was true. Think about if you had this idea that you had to suffer what Jesus and his disciples suffered, and all the Christian saints who were persecuted, that you had to go through life and suffer these kind of, tribulations and trials and tribulations and all these things. That's what you had to suffer to become a spiritual person. That would take to get into heaven. That it wasn't about hedonism and enjoying and becoming rich and famous and these things. You could enjoy your life because Jesus suffered for you, but you had to go through the same thing he did. That you had to suffer what he suffered to reach the goal that he achieved. Now think about how different the world would be. Think about how different Christianity would be, the economic system. So you see how the people that have run the system have been able to sell you something that doesn't exist, because suffering is a part of life, right? And, poor health and aging and eventual death and all these things. And there's going to be miserable things that happen to you. Difficult. Everyone has, challenges. Everyone has obstacles. Everyone has things that disappoint them. Everyone has things that don't go the way that they had hoped or dreamed, right? You have this situation where the imagination is always better. The way you imagine something and the way that you have expectations. That's why, in my own personal experience, I minimize special days, whether they're holidays or, my birthday or any of these things. Whenever you have the idea that something should be special or better, that somehow this day is, going to be better for you or special, and, you have an anticipation and things like this, it always disappoints, right? It just always lets you down, because your imagination is always better than reality. What you can imagine, I mean, if you can look at the other way, your imagination in terms of, you think about horror movies and things like this, the way people imagine, nightmares and things. when you put all this energy into something being really bad. You think about how bad something's going to be. Almost all the times it's not nearly as bad as you imagine it to be. Like your imagination's always going to maximize the whatever direction you're taking it, right? If you think something's going to be great and you have anticipation and all these things. And this is why they ended up having to rig Super Bowls. For years, the Super Bowl, this has just happened recently with the Dallas Cowboys, and there's this, game with the Detroit Lions where there was a questionable call that cost the Detroit Lions the game, and it's the second seed in the playoffs, which is kind of a big thing. Those of you guys who know about that, right? People listening to this future may or may not remember this, but this is always something that happens. But the reason they rigged these games is there was a time where the NFC was so much better than the AFC, and it happened, in a lot of these Super Bowls, that the Super Bowls were just blowouts. I mean, there were times there was like out of 10 years, 8 of them were over by halftime. And it went on for quite some time in the 90s, 80s. And the teams were just better. One division, one team was just better than the other team. And you had these blowout games. And, people would tune out, would stop watching after the halftime show or whatever. And there was just, the game was over. It was hard to watch. And it was a disappointment. Like Super Bowl Sunday is a big day. It's a big holiday. It's a lot of expectations, a lot of, and people were miserable. Like they just kept on being miserable because the games were just so one-sided. So ultimately, being an entertainment league, the NFL had to make sure this didn't happen again. That they had to be some suspense and there had to be some drama. They had to put on a better show. Just can't, blowouts are not fun, right? People are anticipating something worth watching and it wasn't, right? A movie that would disappoint people. That's why Barbie was such an atrocity, because I expected it to be bad, but not as bad as it was. Like it was one of those things that I went into and I had so much negativity towards it. There was only one really possible outcome, that it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. I knew about the feminist stuff, but even that was worse than I thought. And it was, different than I thought. But I didn't know the movie was going to be that bad, right? And so, that was one of those anomalies where something actually you think is going to be bad, it's actually worse. And some, occasionally there are things that in life where you think it's going to be great and it's actually better. And those things are just wonderful gifts because, things that exceed your imagination expectations, right? One of the things for me was just the gatherings, the way they used to be before, the corrupt Dodgy who runs the Saj Margi, the Heartfulness meditation that I, do. And I don't do what he does anymore because he's corrupt and these things. But these gatherings I would go to, they were always better than I imagined or what I would anticipate. And the more I, had benefited from them, the more I anticipated them being great. And they've still exceeded my anticipation because they happened on the internal world. They weren't physical things. They weren't, vacations. They weren't, sensory things. They were what happened internally. And I just felt better, and its effect on me in terms of my heart, in terms of my internal condition. And then when Dodgy took over, I went to a gathering, and I was like, oh, this one wasn't as good as I thought it was going to be. And that was the beginning of the end because he sucked, right? And so, and I anticipated him being better than he was, and that was another one of those, really bad disappointments. But, after whatever years of life that I've lived and all the human life that we know about, documented human life, all the stories, like I've said before, would you watch a movie if there was no obstacles? What if the movie started off and ended with happily ever after? There was no problems, there was no drama, there was nothing to accomplish, there was nothing to, there was no battle, there was no, there was no climax, there was just happily ever after. It'd be a dial tone, it'd be boring. Nobody would watch that, right? In fact, everything has to have drama in it. When they have reality TV, they have to weave the narratives to create drama. Otherwise, it's not watchable. They have to have a villain. There always has to be a villain. The villain is essential to people's existence. So we now know with all of that misery and suffering are a part of a human experience. And so this idea that there's happily ever after, this idea that you can become rich and famous, this idea that there's, some sort of, materialistic bliss, there's some utopia, is just not, there's no evidence to support that. I mean, it's obviously not there. And you see this with people who retire. And there are people who live that whole life in a sense of retirement because they're born wealthy and they don't have to worry about money and things like this for their whole lives. People who are born into wealth. And we know those people are like the worst people, and often mentally ill and deviant and things like this. But you see with people who retire. They think the retirement's going to be bliss. I saw this with my dad. He's like, I'm going to play golf and, whatever. He didn't have friends. He wasn't really, likable. And he complained about his job forever. Couldn't wait to retire. But then he retired. He fell apart physically, mentally. He didn't really like golf, right? Like he thought he was going to play golf every day or whatever it was. And like he wasn't a good golfer. He really didn't like it. So he didn't have anything. Like he didn't have anything now to justify his existence. He wasn't like a wise man. He wasn't somebody that his kids respected and would go to for advice. He didn't have relationships with us or whatever. So it was just like kind of, sad and a testament to, you see this all the time where people retire and they fall apart physically. A lot of them drink, I see this a lot, where people would go into retirement and they drink a lot and they don't have anything to, they wake up every day to play pickleball and talk about the good old days and complain about kids and, whatever it might be with other people their age, and they just start to deteriorate. Like they just fall off a cliff in terms of their age because they don't have anything to battle and they don't wake up to, any sort of, issues. Like if you don't have problems, you don't have obstacles, you don't have things to achieve, you don't have goals, you fall apart physically and mentally, emotionally and things. And so, a happy life, a healthy life, you have to have things that are difficult. You have to have things to overcome. You have to have things to achieve. You have to be on some sort of a journey, and it's for your whole life. It's, until you die, and then you move on and you come back and you do it again, right? Unless you, move to a higher level and then you go do it somewhere else on a different, scale or different plane of existence. But that's how life is. There's something to achieve. There's something to accomplish. There's something that you're looking, forward to doing. There's something that you have to have a reason for your existence, right? Like every creature, every animal has some kind of, they have some point. They're supposed to do something, right? Sometimes I just look out the back window. We have a hummingbird feeder, and the hummingbirds are battling over the hummingbird feeder. There's squirrels. There's a little squirrel, and I guess the little squirrels are tougher than the big squirrels. The little squirrel comes down, chases away the big squirrel. We got a couple of nut trees, and you see it. Like there's things going on every day, drama and, territorial battles and, things that the animal's supposed to be doing and setting up, a home and trying to attract a mate and reproduce and, trying to store enough food and flying south for the winter if you're a bird. And, they got all these things, right? Got things to accomplish, right? They got things that, they're supposed to be doing. There's a purpose to their existence. Life is a battle, and every day they're battling to survive. So in all of our stories, like there's drama, there's issues in all of our, lives and what's going on with animals and nature. There's suffering, there's difficulties. That's part of it. Is there fun and happiness? Sure, there's all those things. But you just can't have one. There's two sides of the coin. You have one, you have another. If you have pleasure, you have pain, right? Especially here in the West, Master charged you third master every time he came to America. He used to say that. There's two sides of the coin. You want pleasure, you have to have pain. He said that here particularly in America because we have a pleasure-oriented society and this idea that's in our stories and in our culture that there's happily ever after. And they've created this imaginary world where in your imagination you can be something. You can reach this, perfection in one field or another, athletics and, and beauty and how you look and your appearance and, all these things, right? In terms of your existence, you can have this perfect life, right? These young girls who grow up with an ideal marriage, they keep a scrapbook and they plan their wedding. These are probably girls that play with Barbies and things. And, these traditional women girls who grow up with the idea of a traditional wedding, that wedding's going to suck, right? If you put all that energy and effort into it and you try to create the perfect wedding and, on some level, there's going to be drama and things in it that are going to not be as good as you imagine. And then what happens afterwards? Like you've made that the big day. Like that's, you haven't done anything yet. Like you haven't suffered through a marriage yet, right? You haven't gone through the difficulties of being in a relationship with another human being. You haven't accomplished anything. You've had this idea that this is, a dream. So the dream is getting married, not being married, right? And so you should prepare for the second thing. You should put all your energy into preparing for that, right? I mean, not just women, but men as well, but certainly women, because they're the ones that, have to keep the thing, going, or, they're the key to the family, right? They're the centerpiece of the family, the mother and the wife. They should really have a funeral, right? It should be a funeral and not a wedding. It's the dying of your youthful self and your freedoms and all these things, and now you got all these obligations and things to go through. You got, adult life, and you have this, this celebration, like this whole thing, and yeah, sure, it's great. Like there's positive things about it, but you saw your parents and what your parents were like, and how do you think they got that way? You think that they're the ones that just didn't get it? Like it's 50% divorces and so many miserable marriages because there's unrealistic expectations. You're not prepared for it. You're not prepared for what you're going to face. You're disconnected from your parents, and they're not communicating to you what they're going through. And if they do, it just seems like they're complaining. And then you're just completely untrained and unprepared for what you're about to go through. And everything you've seen, the happily ever after, the fairy tale, all these things that you've seen is, the opposite of what's going to happen. It's done the opposite. It's made you, feel like something's wrong when you're miserable and you're suffering. Every way that they go about it. Like, kids are great, but they're difficult. They're little human beings, and they're completely untrained, and, they're kind of a nightmare. Like, I mean, whatever way you want to say it, like, yeah, they're cute, and they're innocent, things like this, but they're really difficult. It's your job to turn them into good human beings. It's your job to help them become good human beings. Do you know how to do that? Because, it wasn't done for you. Your parents were incapable, and each generation gets worse. Society, right? Society isn't doing that. And so that's why we have horrible people, because no one knows how to help young people become good adults, right? Doesn't know how to train them into being good adults. And certainly our stories are so important. Your stories are, really important to your development, your internal development. And our stories are all about happily ever after in this fantasy that doesn't exist. And then our economy is the same way. It's just illusionary. And so, when you get the fairy tale, when you become rich and famous and you have you're beautiful and you're whatever you are, successful, and you have one of these dream marriages and weddings and things like this. You marry someone else that everybody wants, and everybody, people want you. Everyone thinks you're great, and you're the cream of the crop. Two celebrities getting together, and they're miserable. They're narcissistic. They're petty. They're jealous. They know that they're frauds. I mean, that's fraudulent. Every one of these people is very fraudulent. They have an image. They've created a brand, and we see this when the brand falls apart. We've seen it with Will Smith recently. We've seen it certainly with Madonna and Madam Expiration Date. We see it with Tom Hanks. We see it with all these people. They're given some sort of a brand, and people know them as whatever it is, and then it turns out they're nothing like that because nobody is. It's all these people on Instagram and Facebook pretending their lives are better than they are. Like they want everyone to see this idealistic life, and you're a fraud. That's not true. You posted these things, and got a family photo, and like everyone's smiling, and it took you 100 pictures to get one where everybody's smiling, and people are miserable, and the kids don't want to dress up, and all these things, right? It's like, look at us, we're happy. No, you're not. Come on. you took 100 photos, and like you got one that looked like you're not, miserable. You don't hate each other. So some part of it, I don't want to minimize this part of it. You have to believe something's going to be better than they are just to do them, right? Like if you knew what you were going to have to face, if you knew what you were going to have to go through. This happened with my kids when my ex and I were, I was in India with my kids, and my ex had kind of abandoned the family and gone back to America. It was a nightmare, divorce was already, we were already basically divorced. It just had to go through the process. And my daughter asked me, would you do it again? Like, would you marry, mom again? And, the obvious answer would be no, but if I said that to her, it would be, well, you guys wouldn't exist, right? I mean, I wouldn't have wanted that, right? And I benefited from it. Like the misery and the difficulty, I ultimately benefited. Not right at that moment, but later on, I would benefit from, just the cleaning of it all. And so, I would have to do it again, but I couldn't do it again. Like knowing what I know now, I couldn't. Like nobody would. Nobody would do the things if you could see what was going to happen ahead of time. The difficulties, especially from a perspective of not going through them, But those difficulties ultimately help you become a better person, help you evolve spiritually. I mean, if you do them right, if you do the things in the right way. And that's, being grateful and seeing that there's a bigger picture here and you have a soul's purpose and there's a reason that you're going through and there's a plan. And, if you look at it that way, but, and no one in the right mind would get into these things if they understood what was going to happen. It's why you can't remember your last life. If you remembered your last life, you wouldn't live this life. If you remember all your past lives, you wouldn't do any of the stuff you're going to do in this life. You have to have like kind of a clean slate. You have to come into this world an innocent baby, and there's, information that you bring with you, some scars, impressions, and things that you bring with you when you're born. But you can't know about those things. And, as later on, after you go through certain things, then wisdom descends into you, and then you start having an understanding of previous existences. You have an understanding of life. But you have to be innocent about it. You have to be, naive to go into life and live your life, because you wouldn't do it otherwise. You wouldn't even be born. You wouldn't come into life if you knew, on an egotistical level what you're going to suffer. Your soul doesn't care. Your soul doesn't mind you suffering. Your soul wants you to suffer. Your soul wants you to go through whatever it has to go through on an egotistical level. Your ego to go through whatever it has to go through to evolve spiritually. That's why, life is set up like that. Your soul knows what's going to happen, knows what, you're facing. And so you have to be an innocent kid. You're sitting there playing with Barbies or G.I. Joes. Barbie's a better example. You have this happy marriage, and Ken and Barbie are dressing up and going places, and you're all happy. Your parents are screaming at each other in the background. You're like, you're not listening to them, right? Like you're imagining what your marriage is going to be like. Of course, in real life, Ken is gay, and there's this illusion. It's all, a scam, and Barbie's, built in a way that's not possible, right? Skinny as, anorexic with like, large boobs or whatever it is. Like it's not, Barbie's not a realistic woman, and your mom's in there, overweight and sagging and yelling at your dad, and and you're like thinking, this is reality, and when your reality's in the other room, you think this imaginary, game that you have is reality, and the reality is, just there in front of you. It happens to everybody. It happens to me quite often. When you look in the mirror, I said I was running one day, and I was like, wow, I'm running like an old fat guy. And then I'm like, oh. And you realize you're old. Like you realize, oh my God, I'm old now. What happened? Like you never thought you were going to get old. That was something for your grandparents or your parents, right? That's what happened to them, right? You don't even realize that that's going to happen to you, and it happens relatively quickly. I mean, you see this all the time. Young people in their 20s, they go gray, or they get overweight, or they bald, or they start and they get wrinkles. People who age really quickly, right? I mean, it happens overnight to some people. Like, they have some kids and suffer a miserable job and have a crappy marriage or whatever, and they'll age. I mean, see, look at presidents. Look at a president before and after. I mean, it's like how much they age, even at that superficial puppet job. Any kind of stressful job, any job that's, like unnatural, any of these things, and things that you're doing that go away from what you're supposed to be doing, especially. You see people like just zombify. They were so full of life and energy, and they were in their 20s, and they were like firecrackers, and really, people with a lot of, zest and love of life, and you see them 5 years later, and they're dead. They look like they're dead. They're zombified. They've ghouled it up, right, and their life force is gone. They're just automatons going through life miserable. Punching the clock every day or whatever it is, right? It happens more often than not. Like people just die inside, and then they age quickly, and they're gone. Like they checked out, and they're just waiting for the mercy of death. Go to Walmart, right? They got some little thing they're looking forward to, some little treat or something, right? Sticking processed foods into their ghoul holes, and watching something on TV, and just miserable. They have no plans or goals or aspirations. All of that's gone. Maybe they're living vicariously through their kids in some way or another, but most of them are just, they're no longer home, right? They're no longer, they had ideas and things that life was supposed to go a certain way. They had fantasies. They bought into the American dream or whatever, and then they realized it's not for them. Like, they're not even going to get on the first level. They're like just, bottom feeders in terms of the economic system, and they're trapped, and there's no way to extricate themselves from their poverty, from their ignorance, from their, physical poisons that have toxins that they've been ingesting or whatever, either through drugs and alcohol or through the crappy processed foods and carcinogens they've been eating. And they're just, they're bogged down by life. They're physically gross. They're obese, and they're, toxic, and they're, addicted, and they're, impoverished, and they have no training and ability. They don't have any, way to extricate themselves out of their miserable existence, right? And, you see this, it's more common than not. It's like a game. How long before you realize you're not special? like, like there should be like this thing, like a game show or something. When did you realize that you weren't special? When did you realize you weren't going to live the dream? And for some people, they think they're living the dream until they realize it's a nightmare, and that this isn't the real purpose for life. That there's going to be suffering, there's going to be miseries, there's going to be, a point to it. And if you spend your whole life avoiding these things, and manipulating your existence so you don't have to go through your things that your soul wants you to endure, then you're going to be miserable. You have a purpose. Your soul has a purpose. You have a reason for your existence, and part of that is to, go through things that are unpleasant, and realize your imperfections, and work at becoming a better person externally, and most of all internally, and evolve and get closer to God, and see the plan and see the bigger picture, and somehow be grateful for all of it, right? That's why I talk about being grateful all the time here, because it's easy to be grateful for the good things. Anybody can do that. But what about the bad things, right? How is it, how are you at accepting and dealing with the bad things? People suffer knockout blows. That's what I was talking about earlier. Like something happens, it's a knockout blow. They never recover from it. Like it happens like some, trauma or tragedy, and sometimes it happens when they're kids, and they're just not able to, overcome that. They're not able to endure. They're not able to, put something behind them. They just, it like knocks the life out of them, right? And, that's why there's PTSD, and people go into a state of shock, and they just never come back to life, right? They just, a big chunk of their life force and their soul like just disappears, and they're like prana, their creative force, their life's energy just, dissipates and goes away, right? It happens. And when that happens, what do you do? Like you have these major disappointments and things, and can you like sort of rebound? Can you have a second act, right? It takes a lot to reinvent yourself when you've been living a lie. That happened to me, when my first marriage ended, and like so much had gone into having an intergenerational family farm and all these things, and that was just gone, right? It's all disappeared now. It's sort of invigorated now with my, my wife now and these things, but in terms of my family and all these things, and it was like, oh wow, I'm 52 or whatever it was, and I got to reinvent everything, and it was, it was quite an overwhelming experience, and I don't know how many times you can do that, right? Like, I've had to do that. You have to do that when you become an adult, for example, and you had, when you go through your, career or whatever it might be, and, you had different expectations and disappointments, and when you're a young person, you have these, idealistic views of things or whatever, and you go through this various times of your life where you have to just, change your orientation and realize, oh, this is much worse than I thought it was going to be, or at least much different, or things end, and, people, there's like careers people had, and all of a sudden that job disappears. Your job is now done by a computer, and your skills aren't really transferable, and you have to start over. You have to reinvent your career yourself. You retire from one thing, you have to start something else, right? And, depending on how hard it is and how much support you have and how much pressure you have in your life, it's not easy to do that. When you're doing it under a lot of pressure, there's just so many times you can do it till you just like, life breaks you, right? Like life can, breaks people all the time. You see people who are broken. You haven't seen somebody in years, and you see them and you're like, oh my God, what happened to them? Well, they got, they got this, they were married, and, I just talked to one of my friends, and he was talking about one of my other friends. One of them, I guess, listens to these videos regularly, and he was just like broken by his, was divorced and, drinking, gambling, or whatever it was. Like he had all these issues, and, life just broke him, right? This happens to people all the time. You've seen it with your relatives and friends and things like this. The older you get, the more you've seen how life can just beat people down and break them, and they just don't have enough to, fight their way through it. And there's no happily ever after in there, right? These are the people who are nondescript NPCs in movies, expendables, right? the action heroes, go through town and just shoot everybody, and innocent bystanders' lives are being wrecked, and they jump in somebody's car, just steal it. Some police guy, flashes his badge and grabs somebody, throws them out of their car because they're, meaningless and they have no purpose in life. They have no existence. They're NPCs. Takes their car, and even though that this person's barely making it, and you just wrecked their one of maybe he's an Uber driver, who knows? You've wrecked their you just drive the car into the ocean, or it gets all shot up, and the person isn't going to recover from that. Their life is over, but your life is so much important, like Mr. Policeman and Mr. Bad Guy, in these movies, right? There's all the people that the collateral damage people, that nameless people that don't matter in terms of the the protagonists in the thing I call the show, the people we know their names, and the famous people, and all these little fans, and all these the masses, the mob, and these people who can come and go and are not thought about. And when the controllers are making their decisions about what happens to these people, some are going to starve, some are going to suffer from war crimes, some are going to get poisoned, some are going to get diseased, some are going to get psychologically. Everyone's going to get psychologically, psyoped, all these things, right? Because they're they're not even registered as people. They're just nondescript masses, just mindlessly going through life. This is my this is my happy New Year message to you all. This is 2024. But anyways, what I'm saying here, and not to make it sound dark or gloomy or any of these things, is that that's what you need to be prepared for. And of course, like I said, you need some level of hope and some level of, you have to be blindly innocent and childlike to go into and do some of the things that you have to, whether it be married or whether it be start your career or go into life. You have to have some optimism. You have to have some. You just can't be jaded going in. It wouldn't work that way, right? And so that's I'm not trying to undermine that with young people, and young people won't hear what I have to say. They'll be like, oh, whatever. I have a couple of treatment center stories. So, for years I had friends who worked in different treatment centers. And one of my friends played on my basketball team and also was a football player, right? He punted. He was incredible punter. And we've had a flag football team for 1 year, in a kind of competitive league. And he played quarterback and he could punt. And the guy punted the ball, it would go 60 yards. And when you see it, everybody, kids grow up and we play football in the backyard and we punt, right? We would, everyone would take turns kicking and throwing the ball. Everyone would play quarterback, and, some people are just better at it, right? Now it's a pretty good athlete, I could dunk a basketball, I could, whatever. And, this guy could kick the ball like you wouldn't believe. And he tried out for a few pro teams. And one of them was the Patriots. And I guess he was in a movie, he was an extra in a movie where some made-for-TV movie. It was shot in Hartford, Connecticut for some reason or something like that. But this kid, there's a kid who's one of these, I don't know, after-school special or something like that, made-for-TV kind of thing. And there's a kid who's kind of the star. And this guy was, playing soccer in the movie. And the ball came over to him, and he kicked it back to the kid. So he's already in a movie. This guy was a good-looking guy. Someone else, the quarterback. Somebody who was maybe peaked in high school. But he goes and tries out for these teams, and he doesn't make it. And he goes to work in a treatment center. These places that I worked, and these kids are miserable. Really, been damaged by life and negative, unbelievably negative, and hateful and jealous and all these things. And so his buddy was trying to pump him up for the kids and say, look, this guy's a great athlete, and he tried out for this is back when the Patriots sucked as a team, football team. He tried out for some NFL teams, the Patriots. And they're like, he tried out for the Patriots. You couldn't make the Patriots. You suck. Get out of here, you piece of... And when you work in these treatment centers and you see these kids and they've been, ravaged by life already, and they're already, they're only 8, 10, 12 years old or whatever. Teenagers even. And they're just miserable and hateful and all these things, right? And when I first started working in my treatment center, I had friends, and I had an ex-girlfriend, a nurse who worked in these places. And she had worked them in a number of years. And I was talking to her like, I really think I'm making a difference. I was like, we had a, sort of post breakup conversation about it. And I was talking about my job and, like this thing. And I was, very optimistic about it. And she's like, there's a long pause. And she goes, bud, it's like, would you call me or whatever. um, best thing that you could do for these kids is take them out in the back and machine gun them, right? This is what her, this is a nurse saying this, right? Like, just because of their, not having a future. And, I don't agree with that, but I understand later, years after, where I was coming from as a new person working in the field and what she had been saying, right? Like, these kids had no chance. That's what she was saying. And, a lot of that was true, but some of them, might have. Like, there's always the anomaly, right? But most of these kids were going to end up in treatment the rest of their lives. They had abusive parents, and they were already engaged in criminal activities. And there's so many of them. And they're going to end up in one institution or another. They were already on heavy-duty medications at an early age, which was going to negatively affect them, psychological medications. And like I said, they've already behaved in deviant ways, criminal ways. And, when they were in the treatment center, they were not well behaved. They were doing things that, in society would get you fired, would get you jailed, would get you, shot. I mean, they were, a lot of these kids were going to die young. And there's so many of them. Like, it's depressing, the number of them. And this is another story I told my wife, this is, we were talking last night about. And there was a kid in there, and he was at a young age, he went into the treatment center. So he was there probably 4 or 5 years before I even started working there. There was a younger cottage that was kids from, 3, 4, 5 years old, 6 years old, maybe just 7. And then the 8-year-olds, there was kids were from about 10 to 14 in our cottage. But there would be some kids that were like, they were too acting out. They were too, this was a treatment there was for, sexual reaction. They were called sexually reactive kids, but they had already acted out sexually in schools, and all of them had been abused in one way or another. And they had behaved in a way inappropriately in schools and were put in treatment centers, right? And so there were kids that were 8, 10, 8 to 10 to 14, 15 in our cottage. And this kid had been moved from the other cottage. He was really effeminate, and his parents were out of his life. And he had an aunt that he was going to live with. He was about to, and it was the last day he was going to be there. And this, this is a story I'm going to tell. But he was talking about his aunt earlier. He had been talking about his aunt, and he was, like I say, he was kind of effeminate. He was singing, "I'm full of the white light. I'm full of the white light." We're all filled with light. It was like a group therapy session. And he was like talking to like one kid who was depressed. Maybe the kid was bummed out. He goes, "You're filled with white light, and I'm filled with white light. My aunt says we're all filled with the white light." He was talking about his aunt. And then later on, I saw a picture of her. She looked like the mom in the Pink Floyd The Wall. She looked like this, she was like 6'4", and, Frankenstein's bride, like just crazy hair. She was some new age woman. So he's going to live with his aunt, and she looked like a real nightmare. And, his parents had already abused him, and he had suffered these horrible things. And he was acting out and getting angry, and, he was leaving that day. And, I was trying to talk him down. I was like, you don't want to get into a restraint today. You're leaving today. Like, you've been here for 6 years. You might as well leave. This is a big day for you. You go out. It's a celebratory day. And I'm like, trying to pump him up and, keep him from, flipping out. Like they all flipped out when because they couldn't deal with transition. And oftentimes they would have home visits. And because their parents were so screwed up, and because, there was too much anticipation, they couldn't handle those feelings, and because they were all, on a cocktail of psychological drugs, they would act out right before their visit, and then their visit would get canceled. Like, they did this all the time. They couldn't handle, like, the pressure of it, right? And so I'm like, just, just stay positive. And, he was crying, and, he was all upset. And he sort of and he smiled, and he sort of like licking his upper lip. And I'm like, hey, he's kind of listened to me. I'm like, because, they didn't. They don't, like, they just didn't. You try your best, but they wouldn't listen to you, right? And I said, I'm like saying to myself, wow, he's really, he's really getting it, right? And then he looks at me and goes, he's got his tongue's like going right under his nose. He's like, I'm eating my snots. And that seemed to make him happy. And I'm like, all right, never mind, right? I want to wrap this thing up. But, a big problem has happened in social media with people pretending that their lives are better than they are. There's that, you ever seen that American Vandal? It has 2 seasons. Kind of a good show on Netflix. One of the better shows. Funny, really funny, well done. It's like it's like a fake documentary where these 2 high school kids are trying to get to the bottom of whether this one kid who's been, he's just a nightmare kid, is accused of painting dicks on a bunch of teachers' cars. And they are profiling, various people who could have done it. Like they're looking, like in investigative journalism. And at one point they realized they should profile each other because they belong to a club that everybody in the club, it's like the AV club. And somebody would have had to have the keys to the AV club to do what you have to do these, the crime, right? And they were in that club, so they were like, suspects. And so they profile each other. And the one kid profiles his friend, and he makes it about this kid's obsession with this girl and how much he loves her. And there's a picture of him where she sent this picture to the girl. And then, everybody's watching this because they're putting it up on, on social media. And, he has his friend, he goes, it looks like an innocent picture, but I know that you took 100 other pictures to get that perfect one, right? Which is, very antipathize the social media phenomenon where people are doing everything possible. My wife and I were walking on the beach last, year or whatever it was. And there was a girl playing with her dog, and her dad was videoing it. She was a teenage girl, and I'm like, that's fake, She probably doesn't even know the dog's name, right? She's out there playing in the ocean with her, dog, and then never will do it again for the whole vacation. She put it up on Instagram. And it's all this fake stuff that people are trying to create an imaginary life, and they're trying to con everyone into believing that their lives are good or whatever it is, right? But if it was that good, they wouldn't have to put it out to the world. In fact, somebody who has a great life has a great marriage or a great situation, wouldn't talk about it because they wouldn't want, they would contaminate it with other people's jealousy and things like that. I mean, if things are going well for you, it's better for you to downplay it, right? You only make other people feel bad about their own miserable existences. And, ultimately people get jealous and all that negative energy will come back at you for, bragging or putting out in the world how great your life is compared to everybody else's. And so, they're all miserable. Like if they were happy, they wouldn't have to do that. Like they want to get something out of showing how great their life is, then their life isn't that great. Because if your life was great, it would be enough. If your marriage was enough, if your marriage was enough, you wouldn't have to go out there and, dress up on Instagram and get all these likes with people telling you how you wouldn't have to be fed and how beautiful you are or whatever it might be. Because you're looking for something. You're looking for, people to tell you something that, you're not getting somewhere else, right? Or isn't enough for you. The truly happy people are hiding their happiness from you, right? They're downplaying it because they know that it's something sacred and precious, and you can't put it out to the rest of the demons and ghouls out there for them to try to destroy. Oh, you're happy? Well, let's make you miserable. True happiness is incognito. And true happiness is people who have accepted that there's going to be miseries and difficulties and actually look forward to those things and embrace them and take them on, head on with gratitude and a sense of belief and faith in God and their plan. And, they're not drained by these things. They actually utilize these things to move forward spiritually and on a soul level, and they're moving forward. They feel good. They feel congruent, and they're here doing what they're supposed to do. And, there are very few people doing that, at least, most of the time. And people dabble in that kind of thing, but it's hard to do. But that's, that's the stuff that if we had a functional system, there would be elders and there would be, this understanding. Everyone would know what I'm saying here, and they would, adjust themselves and stop, following the fantasy and the imagination of their dream life that doesn't exist here or in any, plane of existence, right? There's no, dream physical life. Physical life is a struggle. that ends in your inevitable death, right? There's no, there's no forever ever, right? Anyways, and there's no happily ever after either, because it's a temporary situation, right? You're going to transition to something else. What happens after you die? You have a soul that's eternal, and you have a life that is finite, a short life, and a soul that lives, millions of billions of years or whatever it is, trillions of years, and you have a life that's 70 years. And so this life isn't as important as they want you to believe it is. Anyways, happy 2024. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely born for the apocalypse and the ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.